I ghosted my fiancée after she asked for a temporary open relationship before our wedding, and then cheated when I said no. Our history goes back to when we were kids. I'm looking for some advice on what to do when I get home in 2 days. Megan and I had been friends since we were kids. Our parents were lifelong friends. We grew up together and started dating in our teens. It was almost like it was expected by our families. They had more plans for us than we did. When I was going for my master's degree, I had to move to another city, and Megan stayed in our hometown working on her nursing degree. After a year of long distance, we decided to remain friends and not let the pressure of our relationship control us. We both stayed best friends and dated other people. It was weird because we always knew it was temporary and that we'd end up back together at some point. I graduated, stayed in the city where I got my master's, and started working in my field. I waited for a transfer back to my hometown, and when I got it, I was so happy. Megan was in a long-term relationship with a nice guy, but I always felt he was wary of our friendship. I understood and stepped back out of respect, although she and I would talk several times a year. My boss and mentor Tom was a great guy, and we became good friends. He taught me the ropes, and one day he wanted to talk. He explained there was an open position in a foreign city for 2 years, and it would be advertised shortly. He described the position, and even though the money wasn't huge, all expenses such as rent, hotel, and travel were covered. Basically, I would be based in Tokyo and have to travel occasionally to other Asian cities for a few days. I thought about it, talked to my friends and parents. Tom said it was a tough position but a great opportunity to prove myself and climb the ladder. I thought, why not? I could save most of my salary and gain valuable experience. Tom said he'd speak to the higher-ups and recommend me if I wanted it. He explained he did something similar years ago, and it helped his career. So off I went. The first year was horrible, getting used to the culture and social rules, not only in Japan, but also in the other countries I visited for work. One thing that surprised me was how available women were. Everywhere I went, they loved foreigners. I got to sample the delights of the Orient. These weren't third-world women. Most were highly educated. I had many friends with benefits and clearly told all of them I wasn't interested in long-term or marriage, as I was only staying temporarily. I ended up doing 2 more years. Tom would visit several times a year, either on vacation or to supervise some work, and we had some wild times in a few cities like Angeles City in the Philippines. When the contract was over, I went back home. I put a nice down payment on a house just outside the city. After living in a city of 37 million, I needed some space. I was home for a month, and while visiting my parents, Megan was there. She and the other guy had broken up a year ago, and we started talking more seriously, even though we had always kept in touch over the years. We started dating again. I held off on having sex as much as I wanted because I was afraid of what might happen. I had developed an addiction to having various partners while in Asia and was trying to control that desire before Megan and I got serious. Everyone, including Megan, knew I dated, but on social media, there would be infrequent photos of me with different women. My mother called me a womanizer a few times, and to be honest, it stung. This is when things began to fall apart. Megan and I slept together, and for lack of a better word, she was very surprised. She said I was different and never liked that before. She meant I had gained a lot of experience, to put it nicely. She asked me some questions, and I admit I didn't tell her the whole truth. I didn't tell her the exact number because even if divided by 3, it was still scary. I had no doubt I could be faithful to her. The seed I inadvertently planted in her mind that night would cause serious issues later. Our families were thrilled we were together. It was always supposed to be this way. We were doing great, and after talking to her parents, I proposed. She moved in, and everything was great. There were some red flags, like her asking if I was happy with her. Fast forward to December 2019. The wedding was planned for June 2020, and we all know how 2020 went. Christmas was great, and close to New Year's, we would have the first D-Day. I was sitting down doing some work on the PC, and Megan and her cousin Rachel were looking through some wedding stuff. I've known Rachel since we were kids, and we were cool. Megan asked if we could talk, and Rachel walked into the living room and sat on the sofa. I went to sit at the table to talk to Megan. She started by telling me not to interrupt or freak out, that she wanted to talk about something important. She then explained our differences in the bedroom and said she believed I wouldn't be satisfied with her, and that I would eventually cheat on her. She didn't want our future children and relationship to be ruined if I strayed. So, there I was, thinking I was about to get dumped. Just as I thought things couldn't get worse, I heard the infomercial guy in my head saying, "But wait, there's more." Megan asked if I was willing to open the relationship so she could gain more experience and feel less insecure. She said I shouldn't be worried as I was the only man she ever loved, and that's why none of her other relationships had led to marriage. I did agree with her on that point since I felt the same. Now, of course, I thought this was a joke and she wasn't serious at all. This really couldn't be happening, right? Since this was a year and a half ago, I'll try my best to recall the main points. She said she would only be with random people, never with someone we knew or worked with. It wouldn't happen with the same person twice, and there would be no emotional connection. I was like, what the hell? When I realized she wasn't joking, I lost my breath. I didn't think it was possible for a heart to skip a beat and jump to the center of my throat. I'm not an angry or violent person, but now I was yelling. I started to understand why Rachel stuck around nearby. I yelled, "Rachel, did you put her up to this?" Rachel said she was just there to support Megan. Wow, thanks so much. So then Megan said I was free to do as I wished under the same rules. And I said no. I was so pissed at this point, and even telling this now, I'm raging. I said I didn't want one-night stands. I just wanted one person. She asked who. I looked at Rachel, not in the eyes, and said, I want to Rachel. Now I got a rise out of Megan, and Rachel wasn't expecting that. She was a bit red in the face and now uncomfortable. Megan said no, she was family and someone we both knew, and it was gross for me to even suggest it. I was now totally in bizarro world. Where the hell did this come from? We argued back and forth for a bit, and I told her if she did this, the relationship was over. I was totally against it and told her I loved her and we could work through everything together, but not this. I stormed off, grabbed my pillow, and went to the guest room. I could hear them downstairs for a bit, but couldn't hear what they were saying. It would have been a hilarious joke if it hadn't lasted for an hour of conversation. I didn't sleep all night and was a wreck at work the next day. Megan started 2 weeks of night shifts that day, so at least we wouldn't be home together for that time, and we could both cool down and revisit this later. Dinner would be in the fridge for me every day with an I love you note. She would text frequently, but I kept my answers short. Thursday night of the next week of her night shift, I went to the PC to work on some files and noticed an email notification on her account. It was a hotel reservation for a good hotel close to my office. I knew it well as I often went there with coworkers. I thought she was supposed to be working, but maybe she wanted to apologize and take me for a night out. The next morning, I was waiting for her text or call to invite me, but she only asked how my day was. Then she said she was so happy she only had to work one more night shift. I wondered how she had one more night shift and a hotel reservation. I was sick, stressing in my office. I started looking through some dating sites, especially profiles with no pictures. I couldn't find anything. Tom popped in and asked if I wanted to go for lunch and saw I was a mess. He asked what was up, and I told him. Tom is hardcore man going their own way, but has always supported my relationship with Megan. He suggested we go get lunch at the hotel restaurant, and I screamed, "No, not that place." He didn't know that part. We actually went for lunch, and I was sick to my stomach, couldn't eat, didn't even want to drink. He said I couldn't work like this, and that I could take as much leave as I needed, paid and unpaid. I told him I couldn't be at my house anymore. I couldn't see her, and a part of me wanted to believe it wasn't true. I rushed home, put as much of my stuff in my car as I could, and went back to the office. Tom said, "Let's go stake out the hotel and wait for her to check in." I mean, I'm no PI or detective. I'm more like Inspector Clouseau. I was really resisting this, but I had to know. So we set up in the lounge bar, and I started pounding back drinks, still hoping this wasn't real. Around 6:30, Tom tapped me on the shoulder, and there she was at the front desk, not in uniform. I wanted to strangle her, scream, spit, cry. I didn't know what to do. We waited for 10 minutes after she got in the elevator, and Tom and I walked to the front desk. I asked the reception to put me through to Megan's room, and it rang. As soon as she answered, I started yelling into the receiver, and she sounded confused. "Megan, I told you if you did this, we would be over. I am done. Wedding off. Relationship over." And I hung up and got out of there. Now, where to go? I went back to Tom's place, and now my phone was lighting up. The only person I called was my dad, and explained in PG-rated terms what happened, and that I needed to leave town for a bit. It wasn't a discussion, and I feel bad for how I spoke to my old man. The phone didn't stop ringing for 2 days. Everyone under the sun called me, and I didn't answer. I didn't know what to do. The only way I could explain how I felt was like walking around underwater. Tom mentioned some financial things I should deal with to protect myself. I wasn't even thinking about that. The house, the wedding, loans for the car. We kept separate accounts, one for the wedding and one for house-related bills. I couldn't care less. The next day I emailed Megan and said this would be our last contact. I told her I was leaving the city for a while, and the wedding and everything else was off. I called my dad back and spoke with him at length, and while he was crushed, he understood I needed time and space. He said he still hoped we could work it out. 10 days later, I boarded a plane and traveled to Bali. I never answered any of her or anyone's messages or emails. I don't know if she left the hotel that night or stayed. I didn't care. I eventually landed in Bali and climbed into a bottle for the next month, going offline except to keep in touch with my dad and work. I didn't even care if I got fired. I wish I could say I enjoyed myself, but I was mostly just drunk. I felt a lot of rage, shame, and hate about how things went down. I kept in touch with Tom about my leave, and after 3 weeks, he asked if I could run back to Tokyo to look after some things. We talked about the new global virus, and I mentioned coming back to Canada to settle things there, as I was hearing rumors of potential lockdowns. I got to Tokyo on March 1st, and it felt good to get back to work, even if it was just a little. After hearing lockdowns were coming, Tom mentioned me getting back to Canada, but I said, meh, it's only going to be 30 or 60 days. I need some time to plan my next move. 30 to 60 days. I stayed in Japan for another year before I got vaccinated. But by this time, I didn't really want to go home. My house was rented out, and I was talking to family, but refused any info about Megan. On September 21st, I received news my dad had a heart attack and was doing well, but would need a triple bypass. This surgery is serious, not as serious as it was 40 years ago, but I still wanted to see him just in case. I knew when I got home, it was going to turn into a show, and I really didn't want that. I just wanted to see my folks and thank Tom for all he had done for me, even as selfish as I was. But I knew I was going to have to see her, and I had no idea how I was going to feel or think. I am flying out in 4 hours and will land in about 24 hours. Update. After landing, I went to see my dad. He's looking good and actually looking forward to his surgery. Mom's doing well, but obviously concerned. I spent almost the first 24 hours by his side, and I think we talked about everything under the sun, but nothing heavy. I didn't want to stress him. I told him I am here for him, but am using this trip to reorganize my life, close some doors, and open some new ones. On day 2, Tom and I met up at a local spot close to the office. Tom was already a few drinks in. We talked back and forth about my dad, work, and he asked if I had any contact with Megan, which I said no to. He then informed me the old man, the boss, wanted to see me, but considering my father's situation, it could wait. I knew I was in deep, and told him we might as well get it over with. I had a list of things I needed to accomplish this month, and I might as well start knocking things off of it. Meeting Megan was one of them. I entered the office for the first time in what seemed like forever. Many faces were missing, a few new ones, and the usual suspects. A few people nodded at me and greeted me. We headed up to the old man's office, and I had never been there before. We walked in, and he motioned for us to sit down. I had never spoken to the old man before. He does walk the floor from time to time, but people just part like Moses spreading the Red Sea. This is the conversation that followed. Old man. Good morning, gentlemen. This is a closed meeting, and anything discussed is private, blah, blah, blah. The old man just starts going off on a rant about responsibility and dedication, and he does have some good points, I have to admit. He looks at Tom and asks why they should keep me around. Tom says he does great work, has saved accounts, and acquired many new ones. Plus, we can't find anyone to do the job for the 20% below market salary we're paying him. What the F? Then Tom and the old man start maniacally laughing like that bar scene in the Goodfellas movie. The old man wipes away a tear from his eye and tells Tom that's why he's the best VP he has. I make a good salary, but come on, man, I feel quite slighted. The old man looks at me and leans in. Listen, kid, I know you had some problems with your woman, so let me give you some advice. He says some guy's name he's quoting. I don't know if I'm remembering word for word, but this is the gist of it. God gives women eyebrows, and she plucks them out and draws on new ones. God gives a woman a face, and she paints on a new one over it. God gives her breasts, and she buys a push-up water bra. God gives her a form, and still not satisfied, she buys slim-fitting clothes to change that form. If God himself cannot please her, then how can you, brother? Please don't kill yourself. Well, that kind of blew my mind a bit, I must say. The old man looks at Tom. I can trust you to handle this properly. Your mother will kill me if I have to fire you. So now it kind of hits me. They are effing related. Tom and I walk out, and I look at him and say, 20%, man, really? He puts his arm around me and says, don't worry about that, I got you covered. So am I getting fired or disciplined? No, dumbass, you're getting promoted. He puts his arm around me and kisses me on the side of the head. You could have told me that beforehand, you dick. Nah, it was much funnier this way. I missed you, kid. Now let's go get F up. It's 8:30 in the morning, Tom. Who does that? Do you still have a lot to learn about enjoying life? Doesn't surprise me with this guy. Really, what should I expect from someone who got all liquored up before onsen and got into a fist fight with a monkey? Got his ass kicked as well, I might add, at the hot springs in Japan. We did end up getting drunk. We talked about work and what was going to happen. We talked about Megan, and he advised me that I really should meet her and get closure. He said we both did stupid things, but we are good people. Once I get closure, then I will be able to move forward in my future without an anchor of emotion holding me back. He said once that is resolved, then we can talk about my employment future, what I want to do, and where I want to go. So that was checked off the list. At least I still had a job. Dad is looking good. There is still the matter of Megan, which has been consistently on my mind. I unblocked her on Facebook and scrolled through to prepare myself for what was to come. I sent a PM and asked if we could meet for dinner sometime soon. We only exchanged pleasantries and are meeting for dinner in the next few days. That will be my next update. Megan and I agreed to meet at a restaurant a few hours after she got off work. Now, going into this, I was afraid of two things: that my anger would remain and I would act accordingly, or that my love for her would remain and I would act accordingly. I was hoping to find a comfortable median in the gray area. All my plans flew out the window the moment she walked through the door. She looked wonderful. She smiled and walked over, and my stomach was in my throat. I wasn't this nervous when we lost our virginity together. We shared a short, awkward hug, and I could smell my favorite perfume on her. Was she about to love bomb me or play some emotional tricks? Was she in another relationship and here to show me what I missed? No rings on her finger, not even the one I gave her. We talked about my dad first, and she told me she always checked in on him when she was on shift and assured me his surgeon for the upcoming bypass was one of the best. We cooked around small talk like her extreme workload during the pandemic and what I experienced during lockdown in Tokyo. I was seriously getting ready to crack. I can assure you I was calm and collected on the outside, but falling apart underneath. I told myself I needed this to consolidate these feelings in order to move on. Finally, it seemed we were dancing around the elephant in the room for a painful amount of time, and she finally looked at me, and her face changed. The whole conversation after that is a blur. I will recount it to the best of my ability. First, I want to tell you how sorry I am for what happened and for hurting you. Are you sorry you got caught, or actually sorry for how you hurt me? Of course, I'm sorry for what it did to you, what it did to our lives and our future. I threw it away because of my insecurity. So did you plan it because of your insecurity? Or did you secretly want to punish me for the people I was with when we weren't a couple? Maybe both, but let me say that any other man that was in my life before we were engaged, I never loved like I loved you. Her ex before me cheated on me because he always told me that he could never compete with the feelings I had for you. We broke up for that reason. I did not know this, and to be honest, I never felt bad he cheated. I never wanted you to know I was going to sleep with another man. I thought I could emotionally detach from it, and even if you found out, we could work through it like everything we ever experienced before. You thought very wrong. It was probably the most painful thing I've ever experienced. I didn't need you to be perfect or experienced. I just needed you to be mine. All of them, Megan, every single one, could never add up to what I felt with you. But now I am thinking, was it a real feeling, or the projection of the dream of us that our family wanted, or the fantasy we expected? It started to get emotional, and Megan excused herself and went to the washroom to collect herself. We were in a good medium-sized restaurant, and only a few tables were occupied. Tom tagged along for some support, as some of you mentioned, and strategically placed himself in the sealed-off lounge. I looked over to get some encouragement or a thumbs up, and Tom was having a rather animated conversation with two attractive ladies laughing and using hand gestures, the whole 9 yards. He finally looked over, gave me a questioning thumbs up, and I knew everything was okay. He smiled, then gave me the middle finger with a smirk and went back to his extracurricular activities. This effing guy, seriously. Megan came back, and we resumed our conversation. Is there anything you want to ask about that night? It can't be undone. It doesn't matter. Nothing happened. I wasn't even sure if I could have done it. When you called the room, it scared the crap out of me, and I raced down to the lobby, but you were already gone. It doesn't matter now. I'm not here to rehash the past. I want us to work on moving forward. Can you forgive me? Of course I can forgive you, and I do forgive you. You're not a horrible person. You just made a horrible series of choices which put us here. It's not all your fault. I should have been more open and understanding of your worries as well. I was going through a cycle of emotions, from love to anger to regret. Part of me wanted to yell at her, and another part wanted to take her home and pretend this never happened. For the past few weeks, I had been watching these Reddit videos on YouTube, preparing myself for this conversation, and seeing these men punishing themselves for what their significant others had done. The actual cheating did less damage than their own guilt and self-punishment. I was determined not to be that guy. I started looking at her with the old man's words running through my mind. Painted face, painted nails, and form-fitting dress. Do I even really know her? If this is her outward appearance, is her mind the same? Are all their minds the same? I hardened myself. What now? Is there anything in the future for us? I want you to remember when we were kids, walking home from the park, and that vicious dog approached us. I got in front of you on instinct to protect you, to save you. The owner called the dog, and it took off. Just mere seconds, really, but when you are 9, that's pretty scary. All these years later, I stood in front of you, loving you, and protecting you from whatever would come at us. But this time, when I stood in front of you, giving you everything I had, you stuck a knife in my back, just like the scorpion and the frog. This statement really hit her like a bolt. She lowered her head and sobbed a bit. I wasn't finished. I needed to get it out loud. I'm sorry. She took out the ring box and slid it across the table to me. I left it there. I don't want this. I am pissed off. You think I want to be sitting here with my heart jumping out of my throat and you crying? I want to be home playing with the baby we would have by now. I can't remember anything said in the next few minutes. She began sobbing and holding her hands to her face. I have said some shitty things in my life, but that one takes the cake. I apologized and said that went too far. It snapped me out of anger mode. The rest of the conversation calmed down, and after I had blown off that steam, we actually had a normal talk, just about life and the future. Because our parents are so close, and her mom and dad are like my second family and vice versa, we talked about how we could coexist in this realm as friends. Reconciliation was not on the table. She got up to leave, and we hugged for a long time.